everyone, and welcome to Classical Stuff You Should Know. My name is AJ Hindenburg, and I am joined by my two colleagues, Graham Donaldson.
Hello, my babies.
And Thomas Magby.
Hello. What was that? What?
My babies.
And we are here on a beautiful, beautiful Monday afternoon, and it's raining and thundering. It's, I don't know, it's kind of a picturesque day to do podcasting.
Yeah, we're sitting in the newly erected George Mueller Library.
Yes.
The Veritas Academy has 4 houses, and George Mueller is one of the names of the houses. He is the what? We call him. What do we call him?
Patron.
Is he the
Namesakes?
patron? Namesakes? He's the namesake for House Mueller, and Mueller is known for its established library. And Hindenburg, that's a fine-looking library you got in your classroom.
Yeah, so we're recording in my classroom, and I just finished putting up 7 shelves. It took forever, and they look great. And
When did you start?
last Saturday, I think, and I've been working on them all week.
You got some stags up there because George Mueller's patron animal, no, not patron animal, is the crowned stag. Mm-hmm. And your colors are gold and green.
But that's something we came up with, right? Mueller didn't actually have a thing for...
No, he didn't.
Just curious if
No,
that...
Francis did have a thing for
The only
wolves.
thing we do have is Francis did stop a bloodthirsty wolf from killing a town by preaching the gospel to it.
Yeah, he had a talk with it.
And then the wolf was like, I'm
so sorry.
I'm really sorry.
I had no idea.
And the wolf's name was...
I realized I overstepped my bounds here, you guys.
Yeah.
I'll go back to rabbits.
And the wolf's name was Gubbio, if I remember correctly. And early in the house days of, I am the dean of House Francis. I would dress up in a blue, basically it was a tablecloth, and I would put a fake wolf head on my head, and I would run around campus, and I was the ghost of Gubbio, and I would try to scare kids.
Did it work?
I don't know, but I had my picture taken in the yearbook one year.
Really?
Yeah, it was 2012. This is a long time ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey,
Don't you... AJ also does a strange thing for the yearbook every year. I haven't heard anything... Have you already taken your picture this year?
no, I always forget on picture day.
Okay.
I come into school and I'm all bedraggled and unshaven, and they say, it's picture day! And then
Next time.
I really try to make it happen when we do retakes. Sometimes I don't get those, and then I have to do the grammar school retakes. So, it happens. Anyway, this is Classical Stuff You Should Know, and we are a podcast that tries to bring the classical world to you in a way that's understandable and not completely... Yeah, understandable is a good way to put it. Yeah, that's enough, I think. So
mildly entertaining also.
Yeah,
Yep.
That's what we hope. That's what we shoot for anyway. And today, Graham is at the helm.
That's right. So today we are going to be learning about and talking about a book that we study in 10th grade, and it is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And it's a great book. It is the first, or it's always credited as the first piece of science fiction ever.
Oh, wow.
So there are books that have to do with technology, and there are books that have to do with magic and fantasy beforehand. But whatever the criteria for science fiction is, this book seems to be the first one that ticks off the boxes for it. I have no idea what those criteria are. I think it's, some I don't know. What's the criteria for science fiction? Anybody know? I'm sure someone will email us in and be like, well, actually, there's a...
I'm trying to think, because sci-fi and fantasy normally get paired together, but in Frankenstein, everything is explained.
Well, except they don't really get into the physics or the what actually, how the monster comes to life.
But it's not presented as magic happens.
Yes, he doesn't find some some ancient artifact in a tomb that brings the dead back to life. It's just we harnessed the power of energy and then created life. Anyway.
And I think, I don't know what the criteria is for sci-fi. We should probably look that up.
Yeah.
But I think it's just that there has to be technology that doesn't exist yet, and bringing the dead to life, I think, qualifies.
Yeah. So it was written by Mary Shelley. Mary Shelley was a romantic poet and author. She was married to Percy Shelley, who was also a romantic poet and author. They were a weird pairing. They were good friends with Lord Byron, who, fun fact, when Byron died defending Greece from the Turks. He fought for Greek independence. One day he was just like, you know what? I'm going to go fight in the glorious war. And he went to help the Greeks fight for independence under the Turks and died in the battlefield. And the rumor is, or the legend has it, that all of the women of Europe went into mourning because George Byron had some game. George Byron had some pull with the ladies. He also wrote Casanova, which has Don Juan. Which one? I can't remember. He wrote one of the sexy poems that all the ladies loved. Anyway, so they were friends with Mary Shelley. And they were together one weekend at a cottage a cabin mountain, and there was a huge snowstorm, and they were bored. And so they decided that they were going to have a competition. And that competition was they were going to write a short story competition. And a scary story. They were going to a sort of a horror story competition. And the winner was going to receive, just sort of bragging rights among everybody else. And so Percy Shelley and Lord Byron and Mary Shelley all wrote something. And what Mary Shelley wrote on that weekend that they were snowstormed in was Frankenstein. Apparently Percy Shelley and Byron were sitting together while they were snowed in and having a conversation about what actually is life. Do things have souls, or are we just animated matter? Was the question that Shelley and Byron were debating, and this question really struck Mary Shelley, and she fell asleep and had a nightmare that was talking about bringing a dead body back to life, and then so she wrote the story of Frankenstein. So. Also, fun fact about Mary Shelley: when Percy Shelley died, Mary Shelley took his heart out of. Oh, someone's just moving stuff in the hallway. She had his calcified heart wrapped in his own poetry and kept it in her desk.
Gross.
Yeah, so they were that kind of couple.
So what kind of,
They're like, I wear a vial of blood around my neck, that kind of thing.
Don't you remember that was two famous people? It was Billy
Bob Thornton and Angelina
Jolie. They wore each other's blood in a vial around.
Very unsanitary.
That's disgusting.
And their love did not last.
No,
it did not.
Oh, I don't like this. Okay.
Anyway, but so Mary Shelley had Percy Shelley's calcified heart wrapped in his own poetry in her desk because she loved him and missed him so. Super gross. Anyway, so she wrote the story of Frankenstein, and it's very famous, and we're just going to go through kind of the major plot points just in case you've never read it, or hopefully it gets you interested in wanting to read it, and then we'll sort of talk about maybe its themes or why we consider it sort of enshrined in classical education.
Because it's a story that's often misunderstood.
Oh, very misunderstood.
There are the characters that have jumped into the story. Igor
does not exist.
Igor
is not a person.
I don't want to.
That is movie version.
When does he fight Dracula? Is that,
that's
second half of
that's
the book,
the second half of the book.
Good. That's my favorite part.
Or there's I, Frankenstein, where he's been alive and he's fighting demons.
Yes.
I think on a team with angels, except he's sort of an in between because he's an undead human.
Oh my goodness!
It sounds based on the original.
When the Avengers, the Marvel Cinematic Universe started getting big, Sony Pictures, which is not a very successful movie studio, they brought you such wonderful movies as that Adam Sandler movie where he fights a giant like Pac-Man.
Is it Pixel?
A Pixel, that's right. So that's like the Sony quality. Anyway, they wanted to have their own cinematic universe, so they had, I kid you not, the Monster Cinematic Universe. The first movie being Tom Cruise's Mummy, which came out recently, if you remember.
Yeah.
That was supposed to be the flagship cinematic.
Remember,
super,
and that's
super
probably...
It was very super bad, but that was supposed to be the first movie that kicks off this universe, and Frankenstein and Dracula, and they're all supposed to be in there. Yeah, but that thing's been shelved because that's a terrible idea. Sorry, Sony. Anyway.
Shots fired.
So, I don't know, it kind of sounds fun. I'd watch monster movies.
But you didn't watch
if
Mummy.
They were good.
That's the whole point.
That's true. I would, but I wouldn't make an effort to do so. Like if I was sitting in front of a TV and Tom Cruise's Mummy came on, I might
tuned.
not leave.
Yeah, okay, fair.
That's not really high praise for a movie.
Yeah, it's not, yeah.
And I have really low standards.
There you go.
Really just super low.
So off the bat, I would say that this book is very much falls into the category of romantic. Like Mary Shelley is romantic, and you may have to go back and listen to the podcast on romanticism, but sort of to suffice to say that for the romantics, they're kind of at odds with a lot of classicists, or neoclassicism as it was called sort of in Mary Shelley's day. But they had a strong belief, and they valued the individual human genius. As opposed to institutions, I guess is maybe one way that you could phrase that, and very much believed that the Rousseauian idea that man is born free and everywhere is in chains, and that what we need to do with children and what we need to do with any sort of education is, inspire and light the spark within as opposed to fill up the vessel. Like those are the sort of two competing views of education. The romantic view, we need to light the fire. And then the classical view, we need to fill the vessel. Anyway, and this definitely sits on the light the fire view of it. So the story opens in the Arctic. And you wouldn't necessarily think that this is where Frankenstein's going to open, but it opens with a sea voyage.
Especially because if Frankenstein is sewn together body parts, would he be cold?
He'd be itchy.
I feel like you'd freeze.
Yeah.
Like if he's got no inner warmth going on.
Yeah, but he seems to be doing just fine. It's starting off on this expedition by Captain Walton. He is a heroic, romantic young man who is wanting to be the first to discover the North Pole. And so he's pulled together this ragtag team of mostly Russians.
Now, you said ragtime, and now I have a completely different picture of what's going on there.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey.
So it's a bunch of Russians playing ragtime music and dancing their way to the North Pole.
On their way to the North Pole.
I would watch that movie.
That's a better version, I think.
And so they're going to the North Pole, and he's writing sad letters home to his sister because he's sort of bored and has no friends, and he might die. But he is, filled with this sense of discovery, and he wants to be the first to reach the North Pole. He's kind of got this belief in mankind's ability to uncover the secrets of the world, and the North Pole is the last uncharted place, and so he's going to go and go there. And then one day they see this giant man with a dog sled off in the distance, just booking it down the ice. And his Russians are like, Zatis Kazy or whatever. They're just... No, not the ragtime Russians.
In the ragtime, yeah.
So the Russians, sailors think it's some sort of ghost or think it's some sort of demon and want to turn back, and he has no idea what it is. And the next day, they found another man, half-starved, almost frozen. All of his dogs are dead, and he's on this little ice floe. And they rescue him, and they Captain Walton nurses him back to health, and it turns out that this man's name is Victor Frankenstein. And he says that he's hunting a demon. And the Russians were like, yes, we know. I told you. There's a demon out there.
Sorry, Frankenstein, I believe.
No, it's not. I'm sorry. I refuse to enter this debate.
What? Isn't that from the movie?
Yes.
Great, good.
Anyway, so Frankenstein says, I'm hunting a demon, and we need to kill it. And Captain Walton's like, okay, but I also want to go to the North Pole. And Frankenstein looks at him, he says, I see in you what I once had in me, this desire for knowledge and this desire to understand the world. But let me tell you a story, young man, that will turn your blood to ice. And Walton's like, all right.
And Victor Frankenstein, isn't he in kind of a bad way at this point?
He's in a rough spot. He is like near death. And
he's barely holding it together.
And when he's by himself, like Captain Walton notices that when he's just sitting in the room, he'll just break into sobs and weeping. Like there's some bad stuff's gone down with Victor Frankenstein. Anyway,
and we haven't noted yet that the Frankenstein is not the name of the monster.
Frankenstein is not the name of the monster, although everybody thinks the monster's name is Frankenstein. And all my students turn in essays calling the monster Frankenstein.
Really?
And that's how you know they haven't read
exactly.
the book.
It's after reading the book that they still call
They
it
still
monster.
do it.
Really?
And that makes the title of the movie I, Frankenstein so much funnier.
Yes, exactly. So
because they clearly haven't read the book either. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway, so Victor Frankenstein starts off with this story, and then the story pretty much takes up the rest of the book. It is the story of the creation of the monster. So Victor Frankenstein, as a young man, had this sort of idyllic childhood. And he was the oldest of a bunch of brothers, and he has this adopted sister named Elizabeth. And Elizabeth and Frankenstein are raised together, and they're roughly kind of the same age. And their father was this sort of nobleman who wants to, eschew city life, and he moves to the country, and he wants to raise his children in the bosom of nature. So off they go to nature, and it's very clear when you read it that he's kind of like one of those. Have you ever heard of unschooling?
Sure.
What's unschooling, Megby?
Instead of all the structure of being in a school all day, you give kids free time. They get to explore and set their own curriculum.
That's right. So he basically does this kind of... Victor Frankenstein and Elizabeth are raised in this kind of unschooling kind of life. And so the children go off and they study what they want. And Victor Frankenstein is drawn to sciences, and so he goes off and he wants to study the natural world. And Elizabeth is drawn to poetry and music and languages and literature, and so she goes off and she studies this. And then there's this other guy, his name's Henry, and he's Victor Frankenstein's best friend. And Henry's dad is a merchant who doesn't know how to educate his own children, so he sends Henry to the Frankenstein family. And Henry Clerval, he just wants to like read adventure stories. That's all he wants to do. He just wants to read stories of like highwaymen and pirates and knights and all this kind of stuff. And he doesn't care about science. He just wants to, do these exciting. He wants to have a life of adventure because his dad.
He's awfully nice.
And he's a great dude. Yep. Because he's going to be a merchant one day, and he thinks that sounds super schnoozers. Anyway. So young Victor Frankenstein, on his self-directed education, stumbles across a book. And it is actually a real book from the Middle Ages. It's by an author whose name is Albert Magnus, and it is a book of necromancy. It actually exists. I've never read it.
I have.
Have you? Is it in the Mueller Library?
Why?
No. So I taught this book. We did it for the Great Books class. I think it was that. I looked it up. It sounds really cool. It is the lamest book. It is not.
What's in it?
I mean, I'm thinking back a few years here, but if I remember, it was just random stories of like one time this guy fell asleep and then they gave him a tincture of blood and he awoke, but he was probably not dead in the first place.
Wow.
Like stories like that where it's not
Chilling.
Yeah, it's not some crazy book about how to actually raise the dead with all those crazy symbols in it. It's more just stories that this guy heard about necromancy. And it's not, if my memory serves me right, don't take that as gospel reader. You might go check it out. But if you're all excited about this book, it's not as cool as you think it's going to be. I was pretty pumped.
It sounds super cool.
It's not.
And in the Middle Ages, they actually had books that monasteries would have because in the Middle Ages, they flippin' loved books. But they also didn't want people to read it. And they didn't want to burn it because you don't want to destroy books because maybe you need it one day, but they would just keep it locked up. And so there are these books. So there are these awesome special cabinets of these forbidden books that no one was allowed to read about like Satanism and necromancy. But it was, and also just like maybe pagan rituals for getting rid of warts and that kind of stuff.
But I'm not even sure the books were prescribing them or telling them how to do it. It was just that they existed and I don't know.
Anyway, so Victor Frankenstein gets a hold of this and he loves it. And he's like, oh my goodness, this book is amazing. I want to learn the secrets of the universe. And if this book is talking about how to bring the dead back to life, I'm all in. As his childhood goes on, tragedy strikes, and Victor Frankenstein's mother dies. She gets ill. Actually, Elizabeth gets ill first, and the mother is nursing Elizabeth back to health, and she gets the illness and dies. And Victor Frankenstein vows at that moment that he is going to do everything that he can to render the human frame incorruptible from anything but violent death, I believe is what he says. So he wants to find the secret to immortality, and he's pretty sure that the study of the natural philosophy, as he calls it, of the biological world, can lead him to that task. So he goes to his dad, and he's like, Dad, I've been reading Albert Magnus's book, and I want to learn more about science. And his dad...
Specifically biology, which I hated in high school.
His dad looks at Albert Magnus and asks him why he is reading such sad trash and tells him that he shouldn't read such silly books, but he should go and study more contemporary things. Frankenstein is kind of rebuffed at this, so he just reads it in secret. And then as he gets older, he is sort of a accomplished biologist and wins a scholarship to go to the local university in Ingolstadt, which is in Austria? ? I think it's in Austria. But one fun fact about Ingolstadt is the actual Illuminati started there.
What?
So there was a secret society, and I think Mary Shelley's doing this on purpose. Ingolstadt had this sort of like occultish, mysterious aura around it, and the secret society, the Illuminati, was started at Ingolstadt.
This is Germany.
Germany, all right. And so Frankenstein is going there, and it's going to be all of these top chemists and biologists, and this is going to be the place of this knowledge. And so he's on this mission. He wants to rid the world of all but violent death. So he says goodbye to his friends and family, and then Victor Frankenstein lives in almost complete and total isolation for 2 years as he works on his project. He goes to school, and one of his professors laughs at him because he basically is that kid in the front of class, and he's like, so what do you think of Albert Magnus's book on necromancy? And his professor basically makes fun of him and says how you're reading such crappy material. It would be the equivalent of like if someone said, "What do you think of this particular piece of philosophy?" and then they quote something from like Reddit or something, or like 4chan or some like dark hole of the internet. His professor makes fun of him, but then there's this other professor that sees something in Frankenstein and takes him under his wing and teaches him real chemistry. And Frankenstein, is sort of tutored by this man. Various things happen where Mary Shelley kind of glosses over how Frankenstein stumbles upon this mystery, but he does stumble upon the mystery of how to bring inanimate things back to life.
He figures it out.
He figures it out, and it has something to do with lightning. So the movies do get it correct.
Does it have something to do with lightning?
Yeah,
I don't remember that from the book.
He's sitting thinking about this, and he sees a tree get struck by lightning and explode, like the tree explodes, and he's like, "Wow, such power!" And he goes to the tree and he sees that it's like humming with electricity, and he's like, "This will do it." And then,
but I don't remember it being involved in the actual process. Was it?
I don't. Not in the way that we popularly have it in our
where
brains.
he like cranks him up to the ceiling and then calls it down with lightning rods.
It's alive!
Yeah, that's not part of it.
That's not part of the story.
He basically, I don't want to spoil anything.
But anyway, so what he starts doing is at nighttime, he sneaks into cryptoriums and mausoleums and graveyards and digs up freshly dead bodies, chops them up, sews them together, and tries to bring them back to life. I think there's a couple of scenes where he like actually gets an arm to like wibble around. Wiggle, move around. And he's like, "I'm onto something." And then he, in sort of this fit of madness, he has this period where he's going off and he is trying to find just the choicest, most beautiful body parts he can find. And he pieces together what he thinks is this dead Adonis. You know, he's got the best torso he can find, beautiful teeth, wonderful hair. He's found the best of the best. And then he's at that moment, and he actually brings this creature to life. He says that, let's see if I can find the speech where he even talks about his reason and rationale for wanting to do this. Yes. So this is what Frankenstein says when he is thinking of creating a new species. He says, "No one can conceive the variety of feelings which bore me onwards, like a hurricane, in the first enthusiasm of success." So this is right before he's going to mate the monster. "Life and death appeared to me ideal bounds, which I should first break through and pour a torrent of light into our dark world. A new species would bless me as its creator and source. Many happy and excellent natures would owe their being to me. No father could claim the gratitude of his child so completely as I should deserve theirs. Pursuing these reflections, I thought that if I could bestow animation upon lifeless matter, I might, in the process of time, although I now found it impossible, renew life where death had apparently devoted the body to corruption."
Has this guy never read the Bible?
What do you mean?
That he would create all these things, and for sure they would love him.
They would
and
just love him.
their
Yeah.
allegiance to him, and nothing could possibly go wrong.
Nothing could possibly go wrong. Well, this is...
Creations always love their creator.
Well, this is why you don't unschool your children, right? It's because then they miss things like reading the Bible, or having if they just sort of focus on biology, well, maybe they miss some of these. They don't have the bumpers on their bowling game or whatever. All right.
Mm-hmm. But he did figure out how to bring dead stuff back to life.
He did, yes. Oh, he's a very successful scientist.
Yeah.
But that's about all he is. So he brings the dead back to life, and when it opens his eyes, when the monster has no name, it's just called like monster or demon or creation. When it opens its eyes, it's like it's got these watery, pale yellow eyes, and it's got black teeth and greasy matted hair. And Frankenstein says, when it was laying on the table, I thought it looked beautiful because I had made it. But now, when it was alive, it filled me with horror and fear, and Frankenstein promptly faints and passes out. This is a common theme in the book, is Frankenstein
going to sleep.
passing out at like key moments of high drama. So the monster is alive.
So the poor monster first experience is seeing its maker pass out.
Yes. So And Frankenstein's sort of in and out of consciousness, and the monster reaches out towards Frankenstein, his maker, and makes inaudible guttural noises. And Frankenstein screams and yells and runs into his bedroom, closes the door, and passes out on the bed. And then when he wakes up, the monster's gone. And you know what Frankenstein says?
Thank goodness.
Whew, glad that's done.
No problems here.
Yep.
Problem solved.
Problem solved.
He has kind of a habit of taking naps at the moment. He's got the Odysseus sleep problem where...
And Virgil. I mean, and Dante as well.
And Dante, where at the most critical moments when they're in most need of action, they have a nap.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's what he's doing.
Yeah. So he passes out, and then the monster's gone, and he sort of is in this feverish state. He's quite sick and ill because of what he has done. It has taken its toll. He's been doing late nights. He's been pulling all-nighters, Thomas, to get his project done.
His work, yeah.
His independent study research project. And it's taken its toll. He's sick. Well, one day then Henry comes looking for him because Frankenstein hasn't written home in like 2 years. And Henry and Elizabeth and his dad and his little brother William, they're all worried about him. And so Henry shows up, and Frankenstein is in a state of illness, and Henry's like, oh my goodness, I'm going to nurse you back to health. And meanwhile, Frankenstein is like mumbling crazy things about demons while he's asleep. Henry nurses him back to health, and then Frankenstein's like, well, you know what? Well, the monster's probably gone, and I should just probably live the rest of my life, and not really worry about
Forget
it.
this ever happened.
He's kind of proud that he has the secret to everlasting life, but he kind of realizes that it was this bigger deal than he thought. So the monster's gone. We don't need to worry about it. Phew. All right. So Dad Frankenstein is concerned about Victor Frankenstein and wants Victor Frankenstein to come home. And I think at this point, like 2 years pass at this point, where Frankenstein is sort of at school and is finishing his studies, and Henry Clerval reports back, hey, Frankenstein's not dead. He's just was really sick. So a couple years pass, and then Frankenstein decides that he's going to go home. His dad wants to see him. And the sort of underlying subtext of everything that was going on was that Elizabeth, their ward, this girl that they took in and educated, is of marrying age, and it would be great if her and Frankenstein got married. So Elizabeth and Frankenstein...
And not weird at all.
Yeah, not weird at all. And the kids are like, wait, what? And I even think in the book they refer to her as cousin. Mm. And so I'm like, does that make it better, kids? And they don't think it does make it better.
I think they're right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, back then, marrying cousins was
right.
a thing.
It was a thing.
Cousins were an option.
Still very weird. Anyway, so Frankenstein's going back to marry Elizabeth, and on his way back, a letter arrives that his beloved son or brother William is missing. Actually, and has been found and has been murdered. And so with a heavy heart, Frankenstein and Henry returned back to their house in Switzerland, and they hear the story. That little baby William was found strangled in the woods. And they know who the murderer was. And it was this one of their servant girls named Justine. And Justine professes innocence. And when Frankenstein looks at his dead brother's mangled body, he sees the handprint around William's neck is much, much too big to have been Justine's, but bears an eerie resemblance to that of the monster's.
What?
Size, that is. So Frankenstein, in his heart of hearts, knows the monster has killed William, but refuses to say anything. So then this whole story comes out that Justine and William Justine was basically like William's guardian, and at some point, William had this little necklace around a little locket that had the mother's picture in it, the mother who had died many years ago. And Justine had been sort of rescued and brought into the Frankenstein family by the mother, and sort of really carried a torch for her, and had sort of made reference a couple of times that she really wished that she could have the locket herself. But it was William's, and so, she wasn't going to take it, but, she just really was fond of that locket because it was the only picture of Lady Frankenstein. William is killed. Justine is found in her little guest house, and the locket is found under her pillow. Well, the police put it together, and Justine is arrested, and Elizabeth decides that she is going to, be Justine's defense attorney in the court. But everything kind of goes haywire, and Justine is convicted of the murder of William, professing her innocence to the end. But the locket, no one else was with William, and the locket is sort of their slam dunk piece of evidence. And Justine is condemned to death. And at that point, Elizabeth says that she no longer believes that there is any light left in this world. And then the Daddy Frankenstein, goes into a supreme bout of depression, and it's kind of real sad.
What was the dad's name? Tell me it's Frank.
Frank Frankenstein? I don't know. Oh, it's shoot. It's like not it's not like Orloff. What is it? It's like
Alphonse?
Alphonse. Yeah, Alphonse Frankenstein. So then the
horrible
dad,
name.
it is a whole, well, he's Swiss, or he's German, or Austrian, or whatever.
Poor guy.
So the dad says, you know what, Frankenstein, the only way I'm going to be happy is to see you and Elizabeth happily married because my son got strangled. And so Frankenstein and Elizabeth decide to start on their wedding. Frankenstein is upset that his brother has died, and he is for sure certain the monster did it. He's like, I
think there's no more auspicious beginning for a wedding than a murder.
Than a murder, that's right.
Sure.
Frankenstein knows the monster did it, and he didn't stand up and he didn't save Justine, even though he could vouch for another murderer.
Well, they would have thought he was nuts.
They would have thought he was crazy. So Frankenstein does what every romantic hero does when he has something to think about. He just goes in for a big, long walk in the mountains.
Great.
So he goes for a long walk in the mountains, and he sees this creature striding towards him at a quick pace. And he sees that it is the monster. And immediately, Frankenstein readies himself, and the book says he readies himself for mortal combat. And in my mind, all I can hear is the Mortal Kombat music. Anyway,
Mortal
that's
Kombat.
the one. And none of our students know what that is anymore because that is a cultural reference that has passed them by.
We watched it last year for Bad Movie Club.
Oh,
Yeah, so they kind of
doing the Lord's work.
Yeah,
That
we're
made
doing
me.
our small,
Thank you.
our small part.
I can't imagine that the giant, strong Adonis that can strangle people with one hand would have any difficulty
With like the
Taking
besting
wimpy
this like
scientist
wimpy biology scientist that has spent his evenings sort of studying books
and passing out at
and
the first
having
sign
naps.
of problems.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Frankenstein sort of girds his loins for combat, and the monster talks to him in very eloquent English and says...
he's well spoken.
He's well spoken. He says, I'm going to tell you how I came this way. And first of all, you're a jerk. And then the monster tells his story. And so on the mountain, the monster tells his story. But before I continue, one thing I should want to point out is that this book of Frankenstein, it's kind of like Paradise Lost fan fiction. Mary Shelley and the Romantics loved Paradise Lost, but they specifically loved like the first 4 books of Paradise Lost when Satan's like kind of awesome.
They're called Satanists.
Yes.
That's misunderstand. Like,
Really?
we understand the word Satanist to mean someone who worships Satan.
Right.
In this case, that's kind of true, but only because they think Satan is the hero of
They
Paradise
really
Lost.
like the character of Satan. They love the fact that he, all the powers that be tell him he has to do something, and he says no to that.
He's like a spirited rebel.
Yes. And so, and he says, like, if that means that I'm going to live life in absolute misery, you can't take away my ability to say no. And for Milton thinks that that's pathetic.
Right.
And Satan is on
this downward trajectory. And by the end, he's not this kind of like awesome rebel. He's kind of this like silly snake.
like whining.
This little sort of whiny creature. But the Romantics, who very much loved the power of the individual, loved Satan book 1 through 4 of Paradise Lost, and kind of thought that Satan books 9 through 12 was Milton just like being a good Christian. But really, Milton loves the rebel Satan. Anyway, so they misread it. But so Mary Shelley decides that she is going to have her monster be the new Satan character. This book's also called The Modern Prometheus. I'm a little. Do you know, Hannibal? Do you know the tale of Prometheus? I'm a little fuzzy on it.
Prometheus. There was so Zeus created the humans, and he wanted to keep them in subservience, and Prometheus didn't think that was okay, so he went and stole fire from the gods in a fennel stalk, delivered that fire to the humans, and from that fire they made all of their ironcraft and all of their
So like the
all
first
of their
piece of technology. Yeah.
It was what drew them out of just being blank animals, and then for that transgression, he was tied to the stone, and a bird ate his liver out every day, and it would regrow because he was a titan. So he would he's punished for the goodwill that he did. I think Frankenstein being the name of the scientist, the modern Prometheus, so he brings something great to
this new technology, this new thing.
He raises something from animal to human, and then he is punished for it.
Yes.
So there's no condemnation of Victor Frankenstein?
He's the modern Prometheus.
Yes. So, but in the story AJ just told, I usually interpret that as Zeus is unfairly punishing Prometheus.
Yeah.
So what I'm asking is Victor Frankenstein not judged for what he's doing here, for denying the beginning and end of life, for pushing the bounds of knowledge into places it shouldn't go?
Maybe. Shelley's sympathies really do lie with the monster. Let's bring that up at the end.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that at the end, because that's sort of this interesting question: is does Mary Shelley like technology and science, or does she say it's dangerous? Anyway, we'll get there. So the monster tells his story, and the monster basically says, "Well, you passed out and ran away, and I was real sad, and I was hungry and naked, so I put on a coat and I went outside." And he said, basically, I had to learn things for myself. So I saw birds chirping, and they made me smile. And I was really hungry, and I tried to eat a stick, and it didn't work. And I eventually ate berries and was cold. And it's this sort of really sad, depressing story that he tells about being cold and wet and waking up with dew on him and shivering and eating berries but never being satisfied.
And when he found fire.
Yeah, he comes across this campfire, and he sees that there's meat that has been cooked over the campfire, and he eats it, and he's like, this is amazing. So he's like, fire makes food better. So he puts berries on the fire, and that doesn't work. Yeah. And the campfire keeps him warm, so he's like, oh man, if I'm a little bit warm near the campfire, imagine how awesome it'll be to be in the campfire. And he goes in the campfire and burns himself and howls and runs around and curses this fire that has hurt him. Sees a bunch of peasants, wants to try to communicate with them. They are freaked out at this like naked guy wearing a coat.
With burned hands and berries all over
and
his
is like
face.
10 feet tall and like inaudibly rumbling towards them, and they like throw sticks at him, and like children are crying and women are fainting.
And he's got like mismatched eyes and all kinds of crazy
And so
stuff.
he gets driven out of all these little towns, and he realizes that he's an ugly monster and that no one likes him. And he's mad at Frankenstein for making him hideous. And then he goes and he sees his little hut with this family. And we'll find out their name is the DeLacy family. And the monster hides in their woodshed and can observe the family through like a hole in the wall. And he comes to love this family, and he does chores for them, like he'll chop wood, and then they'll wake up and they'll be like, all our wood's chopped. This is great. Thanks, forest creature. They don't know who's been chopping their wood, and they think it's some sort of like woodland elf.
Oh. Really?
Mm-hmm. And they're very pleased with this.
And they're destitute, right?
And they are in absolute poverty. They're basically scraping out subsistence. The father is blind, and he plays beautiful music that makes the monster cry. And Felix, the oldest son, and Agatha, the daughter, they're always in mourning sadness. And the monster doesn't know why. And then this girl shows up, and her name is Seyfi. And she is Turkish. She is from the East. And when she shows up, Felix is happy again. And it turns out that Seyfi and Felix are lovers, and there's this whole backstory where Seyfi's father betrayed the DeLacy's, and now the DeLacy's, a once noble family, are in poverty. And but Seyfi like rejects her father and comes to find Felix, and they're going to happily live together. Seyfi can't speak English, so Agatha, the sister, teaches Seyfi to speak English through reading. And so the monster learns English as Seyfi learns English. He's sitting there in the hut and he learns to speak. And then he finds 3 books in a garbage heap. He finds Plutarch's Lives. He finds some other history book I can't remember. And he finds Paradise Lost. And he loves those books and he reads them, and that forms the basis of his education. So he learns about great men and terrible men and power and murder through Plutarch's Lives. And as he reads Paradise Lost, he realizes that he is both like Adam, created by a creator, but also like Satan, someone who has been rejected by his creator. But Satan in Paradise Lost wanted to strive out on his own, but all the monsters ever wanted was to be accepted by his creator, and his creator has abandoned him. And so he realizes, like, I want to go mess up Frankenstein's life. Right. I want revenge. He's made me, and Satan was made sufficient to stand, though free to fall. That's the line in Paradise Lost. And the monster said, I was not made sufficient to stand. Frankenstein did not give me everything I needed for happiness. And the main thing that the monster wants is friendship, love, community. He wants somebody to be with. He wants a girlfriend. So he goes pretty bad.
He's feeling real low.
Anyway, he hatches this plan. He's like, the DeLacy's will love me, and Mr. DeLacy's blind, so I'll talk to him first so he doesn't freak out. So he starts talking. So one day everyone's gone except Mr. DeLacy, and he starts talking to him, and Mr. DeLacy is like, are you the fine fellow that's been helping us with our wood? And the monster's like, yes, it is I. I am your woodland creature friend. And the dad's like, oh, well, you're welcome to stay for dinner. And the monster's like, this is all I've ever wanted. And then Felix shows up and he's like, bah, Dad, what are you talking to? And he hits him with a stick, not the dad, the monster, and throws a rock at him. And then the DeLacy family escape and run away, and the monster is so heartbroken he burns their house down and dances in a ring around the burning house.
Yeah, because doesn't he sort of feel really bad, then leave, and then when he comes back tomorrow to try to make amends and meet them again, they're
all gone. And so yes, in rage, he burns down their house.
So sad.
And then he decides that he is going to wreak his revenge on Frankenstein. If I, the monster, can have no companions on Earth, Frankenstein will have no moment's peace. So he goes off, and on the way there, he stumbles upon this little presumptuous little boy, and who's like, "Oh, you're ugly," and the monster's like, "Out of my way, little kid. I'm going to find Frankenstein." And the little boy's like, that's my name. And then the monster realizes that this is one of the Frankensteins and strangles him and kills him. Realizes that he's killed this kid and then plants the little kid's locket in what's-her-face? Justine's room so that she takes the blame. And now the monster is here, and he tells Frankenstein, he's like, listen, I killed William. I know, but that's for, like, abandoning me when I was created. So we're even.
It's messed up.
What I want you to do, Victor Frankenstein, is make me a lady monster. And if you do not make me a lady monster, I will murder everybody you love. And if you make me a lady monster,
you'll never hear from me.
You'll never hear from me again, and I will go off, and her and I will just live happily forever after in the woods.
Everything will be real chill.
Everything will be real chill. And he's like, take your time, think about it. And Victor Frankenstein's like, all right, crap, what do I do?
At this point, the monster is sort of on that precipice, right, between good and evil. Because
That's right.
He has done an evil thing, but he desires to be good.
He wants to be good. And he thinks that being good is going to come from having a wife, having a co-relation.
Yeah.
So Frankenstein has this big moral question he needs to answer. Do I make a lady monster or not? And in my English class, we spent an entire class period debating that. And we basically do like a game theory. We're like, what's the worst thing that can happen? What's the best thing that can happen? What's the most likely scenario? What's the least likely scenario? We just play this whole thing. It's really fun.
Is there a side that normally wins?
Yeah, don't make the lady monster. I don't want the students usually say, wait a second, but if Frankenstein does it in such a way that they can reproduce, then you have like a whole race of monsters, and that's bad.
Yeah.
And isn't that one thing Frankenstein thinks too?
Yeah, he
says,
does.
I don't want to.
And then some student always says, well, why don't you just make the lady monster like infertile? And then another student usually quotes Jurassic Park. Nature finds a way. It's true. Anyway, so we have that big debate. Frankenstein decides that before he gets married, him and Henry are going to go on a 2-year-long bachelor road trip.
Woo! Wow.
So they're going on a road trip to England. They're going to go on a walking tour of the hill country of England.
Sounds like a great idea.
Sounds like an awesome idea. Something that...
Sounds like a really great
idea. That sounds like a wonderful,
I like this
wonderful idea. We'll mention that at the end.
Okay.
So him and Henry go off, and then partway through, Henry's like, I really want to go to Ireland. And Frankenstein's like, you know what? I just want to chill in Scotland for a bit. And so Henry leaves, and Frankenstein decides he's going to make the lady monster. And he gets all the parts, and he puts them all together. And it's
at the local Napa Auto Parts store.
Check your fluids. And gets the lady monster all ready to roll, and he's about to like pull the switch or whatever, and it's a dark and stormy night. It's very atmospheric, and he looks.
And he's on this island by himself, right?
He's on an island in Scotland, and
everyone's kind of suspicious of him because he goes out to this island all the time.
And graves are being dug up.
It's all really weird.
It's either him or like the weird Fergus guy that lives in whatever. So he's digging up Scotland.
Oh, okay.
He's digging up these bodies and he's putting together, and then he's going to do it, and he looks out the window and it's dark and stormy and the lightning strikes and he sees the smiling face of the monster going like, yes, do it.
A babe.
Make me a girl. And then Frankenstein kind of loses his mind, decides not to do it, and hacks up his creature right in front of the monster. Hack, 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 hack. And
which is kind of messed up.
And then passes out.
Yep. Naturally.
Doesn't he just go take a nap, or does he actually pass out?
I can't remember. He passes out or takes a nap. I mean,
one way or the other, he goes to sleep.
He goes to sleep.
I wouldn't say this
time.
is, yeah.
And then he wakes up the next day and he's like, I'm going to go find Henry. And he gets on a little boat and he goes to Ireland.
Doesn't he kind of think like, that's solved?
Yeah, he's like, I'm glad we're done with that.
This guy.
That'll show him.
Yeah.
And then I think at that moment, the monster, I think it's this point that the monster says some like thing like, I'll see you on your wedding night or something like that. Like, and Henry, or Frankenstein says, well, that sounds ominous. He goes to Ireland and is promptly arrested for the murder of a traveler. And Frankenstein's like, what? I didn't murder anybody. He goes to prison. Turns out Henry Clerval's been drowned. And Frankenstein happened to show up and at the same time that this happens. So obviously the locals suspect him and put him in jail. And in jail, he gets really sick and nearly dies. And his father travels all the way from Switzerland to Ireland to bail Frankenstein out of jail. And they have this trial, and it's basically like a hung jury. They have no proof that he did it. So Henry gets buried, and Frankenstein's real sad. And then they go back to Switzerland, and the dad's like, all right, I think it's time to marry Elizabeth.
We've had a good time.
We had some good times.
Everyone's feeling really at the top of their spirits.
And so Frankenstein and Elizabeth decide they're going to get married. After a period of mourning, they decide they're going to get married, and it's very happy. And then they go on this honeymoon, on this wedding night, and they hear like broken glass, or they hear a noise. And Frankenstein does the classic horror move miscalculation. You wait here. I'm going to go check it out. Yeah. And he goes and he gets his gun, and he like goes outside the little cottage where they're honeymooning. He's like, nope, there's nothing here. And then he hears a blood-curdling scream, and he goes back into his room, and the monster is on top of Elizabeth, strangling her, and she is dead. And the monster gives him this like hideous smiling look and like jumps out the window. And Frankenstein, literally in the book's like, so that's what he meant. I'll be with you on your wedding night.
Until then.
I know. Yes, I think up until then, wasn't he thinking that the monster was going to kill him?
Going to kill him.
And so that's why he's like, stay, wife. I'm going to go somewhere else so he doesn't get you too.
Yeah.
And I can't believe such a brilliant scientist wouldn't have thought of the possibility that he meant the wife.
This is why you don't unschool your children with
That's the real point of this book.
Anyway, so and then the monster has now, and then so Frankenstein's real upset, and then sends news back to his dad that Elizabeth's been murdered on the wedding night, and the dad has a heart attack and dies. So now Frankenstein, all of his families have died, except he's got another brother named Ernest that's mentioned in the beginning of the book, but doesn't get any play for the rest of the story, and I think maybe Mary Shelley forgot about him. Anyway, so Frankenstein's lost everybody he loves, and so he decides that he is going to kill the monster.
Maybe Ernest was just really annoying.
That's true. I mean, with that name. Just super eager.
Yeah. What are you guys doing? Can I help?
He's super earnest.
I'm brushing my teeth, man. That's weird.
Want to play Super Mario? Just leave me alone.
Do you guys want to play wiffle ball?
Gosh darn it, Ernest. So eager. Anyway, so then there's essentially this version of like an 80s action movie montage where Frankenstein like gets together a bunch of weapons and like sort of works out a little bit and basically chases the monster through the Slavic nations up through Russia, and the monster kind of is egging him on. And when Victor Frankenstein is like weak with hunger, the monster leaves him food, and he's like, come on, Frankenstein, let's do this thing. And he's basically wanting Frankenstein and him to have this big epic showdown. And now Frankenstein's chasing him.
And the monster's fine in the art. Like, cold doesn't really bother him.
At this point, the monster has sort of realized how to take care of himself, and he can run all day. Like weather doesn't hurt him. And they go off into the Arctic, and they both get dog sleds, and they're chasing each other on the ice. And then all of Victor Frankenstein's dogs die, and he passes out, and he just says, I'm going to give myself up to the elements. And then he's found by
the ragtime crew,
by the Russians. And Henry Walton rescues him, and Victor Frankenstein basically says, like, don't pursue knowledge to the point of madness like I did. Learn from my mistakes. And then Frankenstein dies. And Walton's like, holy crap, that was a pretty crazy story. And he turns and he looks, and at the window, the monster is there, bawling his eyes out. And the monster basically goes up to the body of Frankenstein and says that this was my maker. He was he made me, and all I've ever wanted was him to love me and acknowledge my existence. And now that he's dead, I've got nothing to live for. I'm just trying to see if I can find the actual thing that the monster says. Let's see where it is. Oh, yes. This is what the monster says after the death of Frankenstein. Once my fancy was soothed with dreams of virtue, of fame, and of enjoyment. Once I falsely hoped to meet with beings who, pardoning my outward form, would love me for the excellent qualities which I was capable of bringing forth. I was nourished with high thoughts of honor and devotion. But now vice has degraded me beneath the meanest animal. No crime, no mischief, no malignity, no misery can be found comparable to mine. When I call over the frightful catalogue of my deeds, I cannot believe that I am he whose thoughts were once filled with sublime and transcendent visions of beauty and the majesty of goodness. But it is even so. The fallen angel becomes a malignant devil. Yet even that enemy of God and man has friends and associates in his desolation. I am quite alone. And the monster says that the reason I became evil is because I had these desires that my creator would not fulfill. That I had longings that if they were just if those longings were but met, I would be happy and satisfied. But since my creator did not meet those desires, it drove me to sin and depravity, and I've become who I am now, this fallen creature. And this is this is Mary Shelley kind of tipping her hand as to what she thinks how she attributes sort of human sin and misery is the very romantic conclusion, which is it is unfulfilled desire. Human beings, if they do not have their desires met, will become wicked and evil. And if they can have their basic desires met, they will be happy and peaceful. Something I completely reject that as
Sure.
as a philosophy. I don't think that's right. But that's her story. And so then the monster jumps off the boat and sort of runs off into the Arctic. And he says he's going to go burn himself in a funeral pyre. We don't really know if he does. And Walton's like, well, I guess I'm going home. And he turns the boat around and goes and sails back to England.
Because there were warnings from Victor Frankenstein, do not seek ambition.
Yeah, he's like, it's not worth it. He's like, it's not worth dying to find the North Pole because you should just go home and be with your sister.
Yeah, farewell, Walton. Seek happiness and tranquility and avoid ambition, even if it be only the apparently innocent one of distinguishing yourself in science and discoveries. Yet why do I say this? I have myself been blasted in these hopes. Yet another may succeed. So he says, don't go after ambition. I screwed it up.
Mm.
Yeah.
So we kind of have these two competing morals at the end. Victor Frankenstein takes on this, don't seek after ambition and glory because it'll just eat you up. Oh, pardon the sound on my phone. Don't seek after ambition and glory because it'll just eat you up in the end. And then also the monster saying, if I but had my most basic human desires met, I would have been good and sought after virtue and honor. But because I didn't, I was driven to revenge and madness. And he kind of lets himself off the hook. Anyway, so that's the story. It is nothing like sort of the old 1930s movies, or nothing like the sort of monster movies that we have now, where you have the sort of lumbering creature that seeks the destruction of mankind. It's somebody that just wants to be loved.
But tries to be loved by burning down people's houses.
That's right.
And
How do you guys try to
killing
be loved?
people. Not like that.
What I focus with the students mainly is, in their view, is this book like a book of anti-technology? Are there technological places that we as human beings just should not go? And we've talked about this on this podcast just a couple of episodes ago with the abolition of man. And we sort of talked a lot about our conclusions of how far we think science and technology should go. Once you start messing around with the human frame, you open up the potential for problems. But But there's lots of good stuff that this book sort of comes out. I think the big one being the monster thinks that if he just has some basic human pleasures, he will be good.
Which he won't.
Why not, maybe?
Well, when you were talking about the monster's one demand being to have a wife, all I was thinking was give him the wife and then they'll have their first conflict and he'll want another one.
Yeah.
I mean...
Or
not.
He'll hate himself and her, and it'll be fury that has no hope. It'll be...
So that he'll have gotten the thing he wanted, realize it's not as good as he wants, and then be angrier than when he started out.
I had one student one year make a very good point, which was how much of a bummer is it that this other autonomous creature is created simply and solely as like an anti-murder device for somebody else. Like her very existence is just to appease the desires of another creature. And that doesn't seem noble. Yeah. That doesn't seem right. Mm-mm. Yeah. And I was like, that is a great point.
Frankenstein's the creation of the monster was originally just to satisfy sort of a human lark. He wasn't thinking of the well-being of the creature. Obviously, he took a nap when he should have been teaching it about fire,
totally.
Mm-hmm. and clothing, and nursing it into human society.
Yes, he's a very bad god.
Yeah, he could have. This could have been done a completely different way. Mm-hmm. He could have taught him, kept him secret, helped him along, and then by the time he finally unveils it, he can say, "Look, I've made this thing." He is not much to look at, but give him a chance. He's a hard worker. He can, run 1,000 miles. He can be a great asset to society, and he's very kind. And introduce him that way. I think it'd be that monster could have lived a very happy life if Victor wouldn't have been such a doofus.
Yeah. And then the monster, yeah. So he.
But is Mary Shelley saying that Frankenstein is, or is Mary Shelley saying that God is like Frankenstein?
I think so. I think Mary Shelley is saying that. So there's this part in Paradise Lost where Satan critiques God and says, if you didn't make me so gosh darn ambitious, I wouldn't have wanted to be God, and I wouldn't have fallen.
This is on you, bro.
This is on you, God, for making me so ambitious. And it's, I think it's pretty clear from the rest of the story that this is wrong. Like that it's not God's fault. That God, everything was laid out in front of Satan as to why this was a bad idea.
He even had one dude that said it was a bad idea when he laid out his plan.
Yeah. He laid out this plan, and this one guy, one rebel angel was like, nope, count me out. And then all the angels make fun of him. And then eventually him and Satan fight, and it's pretty awesome.
And he smokes him good. Yeah, oh, gosh, I love
We
Abiel.
definitely talked about it in the Paradise Lost podcast.
Yeah.
So it's obvious that, like, Satan knows. So after the fact, Satan retells himself the story differently, saying that it's God's fault. But in the middle of it, like, Satan knows what he's doing. But I think definitely Mary Shelley is saying that if there is human misery on earth, it's because of the bad. It's because we've had a faulty creator. It's God's fault. The fact that Frankenstein screws up and disappears when the monster needs him most, I think is Mary Shelley's a critique of God, that there are humans suffering because of X, Y, and Z, and where is God coming to educate us on what we should be doing? Why isn't he here doing exactly what AJ just said, like pulling us aside and giving us clothes and teaching us how to do things, and then unveiling us slowly and saying, hey, universe, humanity's not much to look at, but like give him a chance. Like, I think Mary Shelley, that is her critique of God, is that he is an absentee father, like Frankenstein was to the monster. And the monster, you can go on one side or the other whether you think the monster is right in his critique of Frankenstein or not. It's right that Frankenstein wasn't for him in his life, but that doesn't justify him murdering everybody.
Right.
But yeah, I definitely think Mary Shelley is saying that the problems of a creation ultimately are the creator's fault.
I think I accept it in the story because Frankenstein is such a bad creator.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I would reject the analogy to God, but Frankenstein did mess up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay saying that. I guess I'm just agreeing with what you said of that doesn't justify the monster's actions.
I also know that there's this weird duality with the monster where he kind of, at times it seems like an analogy for Satan, and at other times it seems like an analogy for Adam.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like Adam to creator and then Satan to creator
Yeah.
and back and forth, which is weird. And back to that comment about Satan saying, it must have been your fault, God, you made me so ambitious. At other times, Satan argues that he's not sure that God created him in the first place. He's like, who knows where they came from? I could have come from something else, like a vegetable. I could have popped out of the ground.
Yeah.
And so he even contradicts himself. He's sort of all over the place in Paradise Lost.
Yeah, in those sections where Satan's talking about who knows where I came from, he's definitely using that as like a seed of doubt planted in the minds of rebel angels. He's like, he's saying like, no one was, because Satan was the first thing created. He's like, no one was around when I was created, so I can basically say that I was created however I want to say, and no one can corroborate it except God. And we don't believe him anyway because he's like the man. Please
don't. Could you please do a translation? Could you a modernized version of Paradise Lost? I would like that very much.
Like where Satan's like just a hipster anarchist.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be fun. But anyway, so that's the story of Frankenstein. It is. We do it before Romanticism in 10th grade. We do it right after Paradise Lost. There's so many Paradise Lost parallels. The students like it, but I think at the end of it, I think that the value for reading it is that Shelley says the only reason humans sin is because they have unfulfilled desires. And at the point in the year, there are some students that buy that and some students that reject that. And that tees us up for when we get to Brave New World, which answers the question, all right, if human sin is because of unfulfilled desires, let's create a society where all of our base desires are fulfilled. What is that going to look like? And then it's this like horrific nightmare.
Right? Florida. Isn't that Florida?
Yeah, it's Florida.
Yes. It's this horrific nightmare of sort of industrial proportions, and the students are promptly terrified.
Yeah.
So Frankenstein.
All right. Thanks, gentlemen. We are going to...
We were going to talk about... Yeah.
We are going to eschew the commonplace book and the what we got wrong because we're running out of time here. But I did want to say a note on our walking tour next summer. So next summer, after the junior Europe trip that Magby is leading, he is going to hang out in Europe, and we are all going to meet up and trek across the UK, just walking on this big trail. How many days?
So it's 100 miles. It's you start in Chipping Camden. It's the Cotswolds. We're going to go Chipping Camden to Bath, and it's about 100 miles, and we're going to stop and sleep in pubs and drink pints of beer and eat pub food. And during the day, we're going to walk and see old ancient Roman ruins and churches, and we're probably going to find the church where I think King Charles II hid during the Civil War, and it's very beautiful, and we're going to ring in Magby's 30th year on planet Earth, his 31st time around the sun, or the beginning of his 31st time around the sun, and do the classical stuff you should know, Chipping Camden Cotswolds walking tour.
It's going to be nerdy and glorious and awesome. Beautiful and probably rainy. And our plan is to record impromptu conversations as we have them. And don't worry, it won't be as though you'll have those to listen to rather than our usual podcast. What we'll probably do is have some in the bin before we go. And then I will post those conversations that will probably be of relatively low audio quality in maybe batches of 5. So you can listen to them if you want. You don't have to. They won't replace our other normal podcast stuff. So it's just going to be 3 dudes walking through Europe.
That's right. So that's going to be up this summer. And if you happen to live in the UK or even in the Cotswolds area and want to feed us, email us at classicalstuff@veritasacademy.net.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And we're going to call it there.
Bye.
Bye.